What's up, everyone? So excited to have you back for another video today. So basically, today I wanted to do the top 10 series that I have ever read. Now, that being said, this is going to be fun and enjoyable, but it's also going to obviously take some time as we go through these different series. So if it's morning for you guys, definitely grab a cup of coffee or a nice cup of tea, whatever makes your morning special. And if it's evening for you, then definitely go ahead and grab some food and maybe a glass of wine or a snack, whatever it is that helps you wind down, and come join me as we talk about these favorite series. Now, I do have a variety of different series here today. We have a selection of fiction, genres across the board, though no nonfictions that I'm including in this video. But within that category of fiction books, we have young adult novels, we have mystery thriller, we have fantasy, we have a wide selection. Now, I do want to preface this by saying one series that I'm going to discuss today, it's actually a set of 16 books. You guys might already know what I'm talking about, especially since I'm wearing the appropriate sweater for this, and that is correct. It will be the Sarah J. Maas verse. Now, that being said, because the Sarah J. Maas verse books does include 16 novels, and on top of that, because of the fact that they're very heavy, I have not actually picked them up and put them on the floor before me today, but we'll definitely be talking about those as well. I am also enjoying a very lovely green tea that is made with roses today. It is an Indian tea that was from India, and I am very excited to share that it's quite delicious. So it's my first time trying it. My mother-in-law got it for me as a gift, and she knows how much I love tea. And so I'm thoroughly enjoying myself, and I hope you are as well as we dive into this video. So without further ado, let's get started. The first selection of books that I want to talk about is going to be fantasy. Now, in this fantasy category, I am specifically talking about two major series. The first one is one that I'm sure you guys have heard of here and there on BookTube, YouTube, as well as on Book Talk, etc. But this is actually a young adult series written by an author named Kerri Maniscalco. Now, Kerri, I think, has quite a few sets of books out there. There is another set that she's written called Stalking Jack the Ripper. I do have all 4 of those books, but I have not read them yet. And she's also doing a spin-off based on the 3 books that I'm about to talk about in an adult format. So she has one book in that series that's already out, and then the second book is coming out this November, and I've already pre-ordered, and I'm very excited for when that book releases. But the series that I'm talking about, which is a series I have talked about previously on my channel, is Kingdom of the Wicked. Now, this series I think is beautifully done. The concept is there are 2 twin sisters, and they're living in Little Italia, and one of the sisters ends up dying. And the other sister comes upon her body and tries to figure out who committed her murder. Now, the other interesting fact to this storyline is the fact that both of these twins are being raised in a family of witches who live secretly among the humans, and they're trying to avoid any notice or persecution. They are also told about the evils of the underworld, as well as the 7 deadly princes and how they should be avoiding them at all costs. But when Amelia's twin sister Victoria is found dead, Amelia will do whatever it takes in order to solve the mystery of the death of her sister. And so this series basically follows that storyline, and it's primarily following Amelia and Wrath, who is, of course, one of the princes of hell. So this is the first book in the series, which is Kingdom of the Wicked. Then we have the second book, which is Kingdom of the Cursed. And again, let's just take a minute to appreciate these covers. Like, these are just the classic Barnes & Noble's paperback covers, and they're gorgeous. I love the fact that it has that shiny, beautiful quality to the lettering, and it's raised, and just beautiful color combinations. And then last but not least, Kingdom of the Feared. Now, this series was a hardcore 5-star read for me. I finished all 3 books within the span of 24 hours, so you can imagine how much I love these books. I don't think I slept at all, and it was after I had started working as an attending, and I think I had just come off a 14-day stretch where I had worked the weekend prior, and so I told my husband now, fiance at the time, I was like, listen, I'm not going to move. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to be sitting on this couch and I will be completing this series. And I remember he just laughed at me and he was like, there's no way. And yet I did. So I can honestly say this was an incredible, incredible series. Strongly, strongly recommend this series. The second set when we're talking about fantasies is, of course, going to be the Sarah J. Maas universe. Now, with the Sarah J. Maas books, what I will say is that you can see a improvement in the writing style as her books have gotten released. And you can definitely see that there's more build of the storylines in her head and more, involvement of the various characters' worlds intertwining with each other. But I do think in general, the two series that are talked about the most with this author is Throne of Glass and, of course, ACOTAR. Now, for me personally, I did start with ACOTAR. I absolutely, absolutely adored this series. The first book is basically a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. That's kind of the vibes I got from it, with a little bit of Hunger Games tossed in at the end. And then as you move into the second and third book, that's when it really picked up for me. For me personally, the novella is very, very cute. It's kind of like a nice tie-up of the storyline and just shows these characters as the family that they are. And I think that's truly the beauty of Sarah J. Maas's books, is like she can create this world of characters in this high-stakes environment and still build so many moments where these characters truly enjoy each other's company. And there's that sense of grounding and family, that found family that's there, which is really, really charming. And that's kind of that fourth book that kind of wraps up the entire series. And then, of course, the fifth book is a standalone within the ACOTAR world, talking about one of the sisters, Nesta. Now, as we all know, Sarah J. Maas is planning on doing more books within this series with more reveals on other characters within the series. So we're looking forward to those as well. And those are the next planned releases for her based on some recent interviews that she did. But it is unclear as to whether that book will be releasing now or in a couple of years. But either way, we're all waiting with bated breath. The second set of books that I read within this series was Throne of Glass. Now, for me personally, I think Throne of Glass has way more high stakes in it. The romance is a lot more subtle. It's definitely not as spicy. It's written in a very young adult fashion, but the story is incredible. The first three books kind of set the platform for the basic understanding of who our main character is and two other major characters that play a huge role throughout the series, but it almost feels like a standalone series of its own. Book 4 onwards is when the story really starts to pick up and you really start understanding where Sarah J. Maas is going with these stories. I personally felt that within the first 3 books, and I did read Assassin's Blade as the first book in the series. For me, after Assassin's Blade and after reading Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight was very, very spectacular to me. That was a solid 5-star read, and I really enjoyed reading that book. And then for me, the culmination of the series was book 5. I really, really felt like that's the book where I 100% sucked into the book and also got introduced to some of my favorite characters within the series, and that is Queen of Shadows. From there, Empire of Storms was very, very good in my opinion. And of course, Tower of Dawn is a little bit on the slower side, but I think it has some depth to it as well, as we really see one of the main characters going through his own journey as he tries to recover from a major injury. And then Kingdom of Ash is wonderful. Kingdom of Ash is almost 1,000 pages, and that book I finished within a day and a half as well. So you can imagine how wonderful that book was. I think the way it ties everything together, the speed at which it moves, the characters, and how they interact with each other is just done absolutely so brilliantly within that book. And so I can honestly say it was one of my favorite. Crescent City is a newer series. I would say the female character in Crescent City is a very, very strong character lead, but she has a lot more human qualities to her in the sense that she's not as automatically forgiving. She's not as automatically caring, generous, loving that some of the other main characters in our series have had. And to me, it was actually kind of refreshing because it had more opportunities for this character to grow, more that she should be able to accomplish. And since we are waiting on a 4th book from this series, I am curious to see how she tackles certain things that have been placed before her. That being said, I will say Hunt and Bryce are probably the hardest to read. They can be the most frustrating. They can be really irritating, but Bryce's mind is amazing. The way her brain works is amazing. But for me personally, I think Selena Sardothian is by far the best female lead character, followed very closely by Farah, and then followed by Bryce. But I do think overall all three series are phenomenal, and I would strongly recommend the Sarah J. Maas universe to anyone who is interested in a good fantasy read. The other nice thing is, even though a lot of plot twists are getting thrown at you, it's relatively easy to follow. I think Throne of Glass is probably the easiest to follow because she truly builds you into the world, and it is a complete set of 8 books. ACOTAR, I think, is the second easiest book to jump into. Again, done in a very, very easy way to understand. Crescent City does take some time in order to really understand what is going on. But once you've read the other 2 series, I think the way that Sarah J. Maas's brain works is a lot easier to understand, and therefore it's a lot easier to follow those series. So I would recommend those as well. So to cap off, so far we have discussed Kingdom of the Wicked, and then of course the Sarah J. Maas universe, which I am putting within one category of its own because these books are so talked about within the BookTube world. So from there, I want to move on to, let's see, where do I want to move on to? Let's talk about romance. Because why not? We just talked a little romantically, let's talk romance. So for me personally, this series has been talked about a lot on the internet. A lot, and for a good reason. And that is Elsie Silver's Chestnut Springs collection of books. Now, these books, in my humble opinion, are beautifully, beautifully written, and they get better with each book. So the first book in this series was Flawless. This is following the story of Summer, who is a legal attorney, and she has been assigned the role of keeping Rhett, a cowboy bull rider, out of trouble. And Rhett is very grumpy. Summer is very sunshiny. It's your classy grumpy sunshine trope. And it is the first time you get introduced to the Eaton family. Now, I have to say, this book was enjoyable, but more of a 3, maybe 4-star read for me. It wasn't anything that was super, super special. But what really drew me into this series was actually the second book. And the second book in this series is called Heartless. Now, Heartless is basically following Cade Eaton. Cade Eaton is the older brother of Rhett, and he is the father of an 8-year-old boy whose mom has basically left them behind. And now he's trying to find someone to help him take care of his little boy while he takes care of the farm, because his father is getting older and it's now Cade's job to keep the ranch running. Enter Willa, who happens to be the best friend of Summer, and she is known for being a wild card, fun, easy, crazy. She's also younger. She's in her early 20s, still trying to discover herself, and she kind of gets roped into this role of being Luke's babysitter. And again, just a very, very beautifully written story. I really liked the single dad trope in this. I think the overall character of Luke was also very enjoyable. A lot of times the little kids are almost like props in a book. They don't have much of a role, but I really enjoyed the fact that Luke has a role in this book. And I think overall Willa and Cade's dynamic is absolutely beautifully done. I personally love Cade Eaton. I think he's very grumpy, but for good reason. He has a very loving heart, and he's just trying to protect the people he loves. And so I felt like he is my favorite Eaton brother. And I really, really enjoyed this one. This was a solid 5-star read for me. Next up, we have Powerless. Now, Powerless is following the adopted brother of the Eatons, Mr. Jasper, who also happens to be a national hockey player. He is part of the NHL, and his team is not doing too great. Meanwhile, they also recount the fact that Bo, who is one of the Eaton brothers' youngest brothers, is in the army and has gone missing. So Jasper is trying to deal with his feelings of the fact that his favorite brother, his best friend, is missing, while also appreciating the fact that the crush of his life, the woman of his life, one of the Eaton brothers and sister cousin, Sloane, is getting engaged and married, and he has to finally face the reality that he loves this woman and he needs to do something about it, especially when she has to do a spectacular basically walk out of her own wedding, and it's a spectacle, and it's hilarious. It's so much fun. But this is like childhood friends to lovers, and I think this was beautifully written. That's one of the tropes that I love in romance, and I just think that Elsie Silver did it in a beautiful way. And so I would say this was a solid 4.5 stars for me. Then we had Reckless. Reckless is following the story of Winter, who is our main character in the first book, Summer's sister. They were estranged sisters for a long time. She's kind of been shown as like this spicy, angry, cold person who's also a physician. So it's like deep down, you know, there's got to be more to her. And her relationship with Theo. Theo is Rhett's protege. He's also training to be a bull rider, and he's on the circuit to win some medals. His father used to be a worldwide celebrated bull rider who passed away, and so Theo's kind of following in his footsteps when he bumps into Winter. And this one is kind of the trope of an accidental pregnancy. And I think this one was also beautifully done. This one was probably my second favorite book in the series. And this was a solid 5-star read for me. And I would recommend this to anyone. And then last but not least, we have Hopeless. This one was also one of my all-time favorites, probably my third favorite in the series. It does deal a lot with PTSD. So that is something that if it's a trigger, please be careful with this book. But this is basically following the story of Bo Eaton, the youngest of the Eaton brothers, after he returns back from serving active duty once he's back to civilian life, and how he copes with his PTSD, as well as Bailey, who is a woman who's born on the wrong side of the tracks. Her brothers are known as the menaces of society. She's been a pariah in her community forever, and she's just trying to keep her head down, lay the law straight, and get out of town so that she can start her career. And she really wants to go into the medical field. Overall, beautiful, beautiful story. This book broke my heart on so many levels. It also mended it back together in so many ways. And I just absolutely adored this book. This book for me was a solid 5 stars as well. And I would encourage this series for anyone. Now, what I will say about both the Kingdom of the Wicked series, as well as the Flawless series, the ACOTAR series, and the Crescent City series, is there is a lot of spice. So for those of you who want to avoid spice, that is something to take into consideration. But I don't think the spice necessarily makes the story. So there are definitely chapters that you can skip in the book and still keep moving forward with the storyline. But overall, plot lines of those series are wonderful. Next up, I want to talk about a young adult series real quick. So this series is by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and it is the Natural series. I don't think this series is talked about enough on the internet. This particular series I think is wonderful simply because of the fact that it's charming, it's fast-paced, it's fun, and it basically is following cold cases that these kids recruited by the FBI are trying to solve. The concept of this book is basically these children have grown up in unique environments that make them really good at a specific skill that would allow them to crack these cases. And they're basically FBI agents in training under supervision of other FBI agents. And so 2 of the main characters, basically one of them, her mother, died when she was very young, and she used to be a psychic, so she's a really good profiler. She knows how to get into someone's head and think the way they do. The other boy, who does the same role that she does, actually had a father who was a serial killer and gets saved and is obviously in police custody and police care. But he wants to be the opposite of his dad, so he's trying to save lives. But it's kind of told from their perspectives as profilers and getting into the head of the person who is the serial killer or the stalker. Then you have a guy who can read emotions and plays of emotions on your face very easily because his father and his complicated history with his father. Then there's another girl who is incredible with numbers, like absolutely incredible with numbers. And then there's a girl who is basically a human lie detector and can also lie as needed in a smooth fashion, switch personalities like they're hats. And so I would say that this series just has such a quirky list of characters. It's a very, very found family vibes. The romance is very cute between the main female in this series and 2 of the male characters in the book series. And overall, just a great, great read. I would say that for me, the culmination of all 3 books was wonderful. I was actually so sad when the series ended. And I think these new covers that they've published the books in are just absolutely gorgeous. So if anyone is interested in a nice fun, quick, fast-paced young adult series, The Naturals is the way to go. And I definitely recommend it to anyone who's interested. Solid 5-star read. Continuing on the young adult path, it wouldn't be complete unless I talked about Harry Potter. Now, I absolutely adore Harry Potter. I received at least a book or a movie every year for my birthday for almost 15 years or so, and I have so much Harry Potter paraphernalia around my house, it's not even funny. At this point, I can probably quote some of the books to you and movies to you, because I reread this series every single year and I watch the movies every single year, with the exception of last year, and that was because of the fact that I was in the midst of getting engaged and wedding stuff. But otherwise, I reread these series every year. Now, there's obviously multiple different versions of this book. There's multiple different, covers that you can choose from. There's the British version, the U.S. version, the House Cup versions, the Castle Spines version. There's so many options, but this is one that is dear to my heart, and it is the illustrated edition. If you look at the pages of this book, they are just absolutely gorgeous. Like, you can see how beautiful this book is. I mean, it just has the most lovely illustrations as you're going through it. And so it's just a fun way to read the book. I also think that for anyone who's an adult out there who's read the series and, has ever contemplated whether it's worth reading it again, it absolutely is. It just brings back such childhood memories and so many fun, fuzzy, warm feelings. And I feel like Harry Potter is something that hopefully everyone reads and loves and enjoys. It is a world-renowned series for a reason. I don't know if there's much else I can say about this series without overly gushing about it, but yeah, I think Harry Potter is one of the best series that has ever been written, and I'm waiting with bated breath for books 6 and 7 to be released in the illustrated version, especially now that Jim Kay has retired from the position of the primary illustrator for this new release of illustrated book series. So I'm very curious to see who will take it over. And it's also just so nice because these could literally make the most beautiful coffee table books if you ever wanted them to as well, from an aesthetic perspective. But I absolutely love these books. Love this series. Love these books. Next up, I have to share with you guys a little bit of magic. So continuing on the Harry Potter stretch of magic and mayhem, an author that I really have truly enjoyed, in a series that I've truly enjoyed, is Alice Hoffman's Practical Magic series. Now, these books are just beautiful. They're beautifully written novels. It has so much strong women power, so much family orientation, so much overcoming of like personal fears, and just like the importance of sisterhood and family. And I love how beautifully these books are written. The other thing is they are magical in the fall time. Absolute magic in the fall time. I think it's so much fun to read every single one of these books, especially in the cozy fall vibes season when you can really get into the stories. And then, of course, Practical Magic is also a celebrated movie that was also made back in the 90s. So would definitely recommend the series. It starts with magic lessons, which basically follows the story of Maria Owens, who is the one that gets the curse placed on her family, where if they fall in love, their loved one will die. And does follow her story and how that curse comes to be, which is just very beautifully written. Then after that, you have The Rules of Magic, which is basically following the aunts that are commonly discussed in Practical Magic and their life, their family life, stories about their brother and the two sisters, and how they become who they are, and their lessons in love and life and family. And then we have Practical Magic, which is obviously the one that everyone has heard of and has also been turned into a movie with Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock. Beautiful depiction of this novel. The movie is not 100% what this book is about, but it does follow Gillian and Sally, and it was the story of those two sisters and everything that's gone right and wrong in their story. And it's just such a beautiful book. And then last but not least, you have the Book of Magic, which basically follows the daughters of Sally and their desire to break free of this curse. And secure their loved ones' fates. It's just, I think, overall, a beautiful, beautiful set of 4 novels that just talk about family and sacrifice and love and womanhood and everything there is from thinking of coming of age novels. And I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful selection of books. Solid 5-star reads for me, and would definitely, definitely recommend this series. Next up, we're going to take it back to a little bit of fantasy and also dive into the world of dark academia. These 3 books, I think, are not talked about enough. They are written by A.J. Hackwith, and the first book in the series is called Library of the Unwritten. Now, this entire series is basically following the story of a librarian who is taking care of the Library of Hell. And she basically guards the unwritten stories, the stories that have a piece of a human soul in them because they've poured a part of themselves into the novel they're writing, creating these characters, but never quite finished the story. So these stories haven't been published. They have not been read by the masses. They have only really been seen by the author, and they're stored in this archive so they don't wreak havoc and chaos everywhere that they go. When unfortunately one of the characters from one of the books escapes. And so now the librarian has to go on a journey to find this errant character and bring them back to hell and to be stored in the library. Meanwhile, the angels get involved in this as well because they are concerned about the issues that are going to be caused by a piece of the Devil's Bible being released into the world by this errant character. So there are kind of 2 simultaneous storylines that are running at the same time that end up blending together. But overall, just a really, really funny, quirky set of characters and a really fun story. It is written with kind of that biblical ideology of, heaven and hell, and kind of this idea of what truly defines a good character, what truly defines a bad character. And it's just such a poetically written storyline, I think. And it really does have all the components of dark academia. You have that library setting, you have that dark setting, you have death and mayhem and murder that happens within the series, you have devils and demons and all kinds of things, but it's overall just a really, really fun set of books. So the first one is The Library of the Unwritten, which is followed by The Archive of the Forgotten, and then the last but not least is The God of Lost Worlds, which really starts jumping into other aspects of this universe as well. But I do think A.J. Hackwith's books in this series are absolutely wonderful, and I do strongly recommend these to anybody who loves a good dark academia vibe and wants to enjoy that genre. I'm going to take a slight tea break here. Thank you. The next series that I actually want to talk about is a contemporary fiction. It is funny, quirky, hilarious. Basically, the story of Finlay Donovan. Now, Finlay Donovan is a young, struggling mother who is recently divorced and just trying to raise her kids and keep food on the table. She's also a writer, and she's pitching a story to her agent when she's overheard by a mom, and that lady thinks that she is actually a contract killer. So she tries to hire her as a contract killer, which then causes a series of events to occur that are absolutely ludicrous and hilarious when she finds herself in this mob boss crime world. She has a sidekick who is basically her kid's nanny, who is absolutely spunky, hilarious, quirky, and slightly got a skewed sense of values, I have to say. But Vera is a very, very fun character to read as well. Vero is very entertaining, her full name being Veronica. But this series basically is following the hit mom, if you will, and Vero as they tackle these unexpected twists and turns as they find themselves in the world of crime and mob syndicates, while also trying to lead an unassuming life with a hot cop and an ex-husband who's driving her insane in the mix as well. And there are 4 books total in this series so far. So we have Finlay Donovan knocks him dead, Finlay Donovan jumps the gun, And last but not least, Finlay Donovan Rolls the Dice. So I have to say these are some of my favorite books of all time. All of them are 5-star reads. Most of them I have read within 2 days or shorter, and I just think they're so enjoyable. The audibles of this books are also phenomenal. So if you're an Audible person, definitely recommend this series on Audible as well. Also, the Library of the Unwritten was also done very well on Audible as well for anyone who's interested in the Audible version of these books. Then I have a contemporary fiction series which is based on euthanasia as a concept, which is very, very difficult topic in the medical universe, especially when we're sworn to protect and save lives. But at what point do you want to help end suffering? This story is Me Before You. This is a major motion picture as well, but basically it follows the story of Louisa, who is hired to take care of Will Traynor. Now, Will Traynor is a very, very affluent man who ends up wheelchair bound after a significant accident, and he's unable to do anything for himself at this point. He's kind of lost the will to move forward, and his goal is to really pursue euthanasia when his parents say, no, you have to try for us. And so Louisa gets hired as his caretaker. And this story is absolutely beautiful. The love between them, the care between them is phenomenal. And the way that Jojo Moyes tackles the idea of euthanasia is beautifully done. The second book is After You, where this is basically following the story of Louisa after the end events of Me Before You and how she picks up the pieces from there. Again, a very beautifully written book and really, really focuses on lifting yourself and becoming a stronger person. And then last but not least is Still Me. And this one is also beautifully written. It's basically about her finding her new baseline and surviving. After You, she sustains a injury, I believe. Yes. So in this one, she basically ends up injuring herself and has a kickstart back to real life. And so she being Jojo Moyes, has just done a beautiful job of really developing Louisa's character and tackling some very, very difficult topics, from finding yourself, depression, euthanasia, all these different topics. And she's just done it with such grace. And I think if you want a storyline that's going to really make you think about society, societal values, if you want something that's going to make you cry and laugh and just like feel all the feels while you're reading the books, then this is definitely the series for you. Let me just say, when I was reading Me Before You, I was also in medical school at the time. And when I was reading the first book in the series, when I was on the plane after I just finished my exams, I was exhausted. I was running on less than 12 hours of sleep over a course of a 72-hour period of time. And I was exhausted. And I was reading this book, and I was feeling this book so hard that I was bawling on the plane and literally like had to ask for tissues because I was like snot dripping out of my nose. And the poor guy sitting next to me, the 6'2" frame of this man, he was so scared. And sitting next to me, I mean, I'm sure I looked like I was coked up or something because of just the sheer amount of reactions I was having to this book. But that is how wonderful this book was, is that I did not even care. I eventually just turned around and told him, I am so sorry for blabbering like this. I just got off of 72 hours of studying, taking finals, and now going home, and this book is ripping my heart apart. And he just smiled at me and laughed by the end of the flight. But it was a wonderful experience reading the series. Will probably never read it again just because of how strongly I reacted to this topic and to this series. But I will say that the Me Before You series by Jojo Moyes is a beautiful series, and I don't think it's talked about enough. Next up is a series I actually read recently here on my channel, and that is the Red Rising series. This is also another great series for anyone who is looking for sci-fi, high stakes, fiction. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Star Wars vibe, where basically the current world and the current government is just not working. It definitely steps on the little man, if you will. And so Darrow rises from the bottom to become the top, the prodigal son, if you will, and then basically leads the rebellion to overthrow the current regime in order to start a new one that treats all as equals. And so just very high stakes, very, very fun series. to read. And I do think everyone who I've heard has read this series has truly enjoyed it. And the first three books in the series are Red Rising, Morning Star, and Golden Sun. This was definitely a 5-star read for me, 5-star series for me. And after this point, fast forwarding, I believe 11 years after this series, Pierce Brown has actually written a second set of 3 books in this series, following the characters much further into the future after the new regime has started. So those would be Iron Gold. I'm not even going to try to remember the names. I know Iron Gold is one of them, but it's basically a series that showcases what they have done in the future and how the new regime is running. And so I'm really excited to potentially get into that series as well. I have not started those yet. I do know that all 3 of those books have now been released: Lightbringer, Iron Gold, and there's one more that I can't think of the name right now. But overall, great series. Would definitely recommend this to anyone who likes sci-fi, fast, fun-paced fiction novels. And the other thing I would say about this series is it's pretty easy to understand, which is nice. Once you get through the first book, you have a pretty sound understanding of the different class systems and how the world is divided up between the different colors of humans and what's going on across the galaxies. These are also the special editions from Fairy Loot, and I love these books. I just think they're so gorgeous. So I would definitely recommend this series to anyone that is interested in a solid fantasy read. Last but not least on my list is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Now, this is obviously considered a classic, but Little Women, Little Men, Jo's Boys, like the 4 books in this series is just absolutely phenomenal. It's just such a heartfelt series of, following these 4 women as they go from young adult to coming of age to growing up and really finding their independence and their sense of self. It's a beautifully written tale. It's so easy to follow. It's very easy to almost get lost in, and the character development and the way that the story is told is just beautiful. There's no other word for it. It's just beautiful. It's poetic. There's a reason why it's a classic series. And I would strongly say that of many of the classic series that I have read, or classics that I have read, Little Women is probably one of my all-time favorites. And I have now read this series twice. So I would definitely recommend this to anyone who's looking to delve into classics, wants something that's a little bit easier to read, but is like looking for something wholesome, really childhood to adulthood vibes, and just captures the essence of sisterhood and family. That is definitely this series. And I love watching these little girls grow up and become independent women, and seeing how the characters all interact with each other. So I would definitely recommend these. So altogether, the 10 series that I wanted to recommend today, just as a recap, is the Chestnut Springs series by Elsie Silver, Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco, The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackworth, Finlay Donovan by Elle Cosimano, the Me Before You series by Jojo Moyes, the Book of Magic / Practical Magic series by Alice Hoffman, the Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, Harry Potter, of course, is just so dear and near to my heart, by J.K. Rowling, and last but not least, the entire Sarah J. Maas universe, including 3 main series in that book that all intertwine with each other, which is Throne of Glass, ACOTAR, and Crescent City. If you guys have any favorite series, please do drop a comment down below. I would love to see what you guys are reading and what you recommend. I'm always looking for a good series to read. Currently, I am basically going through the Bridgerton series, and I'm thoroughly loving it. I wouldn't be surprised if it makes the top 10 list soon. I have to figure out what's going to get kicked off the list to allow that move for the Bridgerton series to the top, but thoroughly enjoying that. I've also been really enjoying the Magnolia Park series, haven't quite finished that yet, but so many great series out there, so many wonderful reads out there. So if you have any recommendations for me, please do drop it in the comment below. And if you did make it this far into this video, I know it's a long one, I really appreciate you sticking around with me. Consider subscribing to be a part of our family, and just click that like button below and that notification bell. And if you Subscribe with us. I look forward to spending more time with you talking about everything bookish every Wednesday and Sunday. And until then, thank you so much for your time. It was great talking series with you. I'll chat with you soon. Bye, guys.